So I started working on this project in early November of 2022, and I've seen it fitting to start it with these pallets, as the Carcass and most of the drawers are made from this type of pallet. So what I'm going to be doing is trying to mix these two types of dressers together to make an entertainment stand slash dresser. Most of the wood in my rack behind me is this type of pallet wood. It all came from these types of pallets over the past year or so. So I pulled out 10 4.5-inch boards. I'll be able to get two, count them, 2-inch boards out of each one of these. So right now we're going to throw them at the joiner, and then we'll throw them at the table saw. Seriously though, I did put them on a joiner and I squared up 2 of the edges. That way I have 2 good square edges to work off of. With every single cut, I try to eliminate stuff like this. I turn it and I join it so that I will be able to cut those parts out and still be able to keep all the good wood that I can. So I got a pretty good start. This here is that pallet I just tore apart. I have my frame, I have both side panels, and these 3 are the back panels. So the next thing I got to do is glue them up. Right now I got 16 boards laying here, and they're all cut up in different sizes. I got 10 4-inch and 6 3-inch. So I'm going to lay this plastic out that I got from work. I'm going to try to glue on it instead of the cardboard, see if it works any better. Alright, let me get some clamps. So you could see it on the table there, that plastic sheet I was talking about getting from work. These are actually laid on these pallets when they come into the shop to keep them from tearing up the product. And just for an FYI, this actually works great. These boards you see here are left over. They're not the long boards on the pallet, but they're the ones that kind of hold it together. What I'm doing is I'm going to process these to use as the drawers. Every board here you see will become part of the 6 drawers that are going to go into this dresser. The 6 drawers are going to range 5.5 inches for 4 of them and 10 inches for 2 of them. So what I'm trying to do is glue up panels and drawers, that way everything is dry and ready for me on the next day. I leave them dry up overnight, and then the next day I can come out and clean everything up and get it ready to go. The nice thing about doing rustic is this is going to be the back side of the panel. Nobody's going to see it. I'm going to sand it anyway. But this is the front side of the panel. I made sure to wipe it off when I glued it. So a little bit of sand in here and this side will be all ready. This one, we're just going to get rid of the glue squeeze out. Don't have to be pretty. I think a lot of the furniture I build falls into the rustic category anyways, but this one particularly because she wants to see the saw marks. That was one of the things she pointed out when we were going through pictures of the different dresser styles. Some of you may have noticed that my saw and assembly table are not in this configuration anymore. I did put my saw on some leveling feet and was able to put it right in line with my assembly table, making it also an outfeed table, which is working phenomenal by the way. I'm making sure to use stop blocks for all of my rails and stiles. That way everything comes out nice and square, everything is nice and same, and it makes life a lot easier to use stop blocks. So when I go to build my new miter saw station, I will be incorporating some kind of stop block system. So on this project, I have 5 panels to run through this Harbor Freight bit. I've already ran 4 through it in a previous video. You can check that out in the link. And these 5 are just too much. Unfortunately, I did not notice it until I got to the dry fit. Once I got to the dry fit, everything was just way too tight. There was no way I was getting it put together that way. But once I got it done here, they looked pretty good to the naked eye. I mean, look at that. They look beautiful. So because these are solid wood boards, I'm going to go ahead and finish the edges right now with some stain. That way, when I take it in the house where it's very dry, and they will probably most likely shrink, it's not going to show any of the natural wood, but it'll shrink and just reveal more of the stain. I have made that mistake on a few of my previous projects like this, and it doesn't really shrink too awful much, but I can still see where the natural is showing. I don't like to run my rail and stiles until I'm just about ready to start assembling all of the panels. That way they don't really shrink or warp overnight after you cut them. After getting all the rails and stiles cut, I went ahead and ran the edge of the panels through, and this is what I come out with. You can see the light parts where it took off the stain, showing just how unevenly that panel bit was cutting these panels. I went ahead and threw the panel bit away after I got done with all that. So here you can see me starting to glue up all the assemblies. When I'm gluing up, I'm only gluing up the ends of the stiles, as when they go into the rails, I don't want them to get on the panels. That way the panels can move freely inside the rail and stile assembly. When I'm doing this, I make sure to clean up any of the squeeze out that comes along. That way later on I don't have to try to sand it out and clean it up after it's hardened up. The glue I'm using is Type On 3, and at this point I'm glad that the working time on this glue is like 8 to 10 minutes, because gluing up a panel with 3 panels in it actually takes quite a bit of time and a lot of maneuvering and tapping and shifting, and I'm just really glad that nothing hardened up before I had a chance to get the clamps on this. While I'm finishing up this panel and getting some clamps on this, let's take a look at that corner there off to the right. You can see it's just a dark, gloomy corner packed with a bunch of crap that I really don't even need. That corner is one of the reasons why it took so long to make this video. I actually had to stop working on this dresser so I could fix some of the plumbing issues that's back there behind all that crap. As this video continues, you will start to see that corner transform. Not only will the corner transform, you'll start to see my shop layout move around a little bit, as I'm trying to get everything ready for insulation and coverings on the walls. So I bet y'all are wondering what I'm doing here. Well, these are going to hold the back panel. Not only will they hold the back panel, they will help hold the rail and stile together. So I'm going to add some glue just to the edge, and then we're going to secure it with pocket holes. If you look close, you can see the blocks there on my bench and my dog holes. Those are there so that I can push everything up tight against those blocks. That way it holds it in place when I run the pocket holes in. That way it don't try to run away from me when I'm putting pressure on the drill. You can also see the face frame laying there flat on the bench. Now, I didn't make that face frame in this video. I made it in another video. I made it out of some pretty rough pallet boards that I had that were not really good for anything else. So I cut them down into some 2-inch strips, and well, I think the face frame turned out pretty nice. You may notice that it is not in the configuration of the thumbnail. That is because when I built the face frame, I built it for 3 drawers. I had forgotten all about the shelf that is going to be in here for the video games and the VCR. That's right, you heard me, VCR. When I finally did realize my mistake, I took out those 2 middle pieces and I cut them down to 1.5 inches. That way I could still have my 10-inch drawers and my 5.5-inch drawers. After getting glue on the supports, this next part would be a lot easier with 2 people. But again, I'm only one person, so I will endure and figure it out. And just like that, the back piece is installed. If you watch the right side, I do believe I spilled glue all over the place. Yep, there it goes. The side closest to the camera will be the top. So I'm going to flush everything up to that side, because the bottom of this dresser is really not going to sit on the floor. It'll be sitting on some wheels. There will also be some trim covering those wheels, so there will be no rocking of the dresser because the dresser itself won't be touching the floor. So I'll put some clamps on here to hold it in place while I screw it to those supports. This is going to be on the back side, so nobody's really going to see it. After that, I had an idea about doing some dovetail drawer slides. As this is my first time cutting dovetails, I thought this was going to be a great idea. Well, I still think it could be a great idea. Not for me though. You'll see later on that I decide not to do the dovetails in the drawers themselves. They're still on the runners, but not in the drawers. So to install these, I'm just going to use some pocket holes. As these are pine runners, if I ever need to replace them, I can just remove the pocket holes, pull them out, and put brand new ones in. This should make this dresser last a very long time with no issues. Now it's on to the top. This board is a piece of rough cut white oak that I bought from a fella, and I bought a bunch of it from that same fella to build the changing table. My original plan for the top was to do a top like I had done on the toolbox video, but when I went down to get pallets to do that type of top, there were no pallets, so I had to change the direction. So I jointed one side of these boards, and then that gave me a straight edge so I can run it through the table saw. The reason I have to run it through the table saw is because I only have a 6-inch joiner. So I needed boards that were under 6 inches so that I could glue them back together. I've heard somebody say somewhere that woodworkers are the only ones who will cut a piece of material just so they can glue it back together. And I believe that to be true. So with everything glued back together and cut to final dimensions, it is time for a test fit. Now this oak has been planed down to about 1 inch, which is thinner than I wanted, but it looks pretty good on top of this cabinet. So to attach the top to this here cabinet, I decided I was actually going to try some of them there Z-clips, and I got on Amazon and I ordered some. But to put them on your project, you have to cut slots into your cabinet. So I used a biscuit joiner, and once I got it set, everything looked to seem to be alright. Then it was time to screw the Z-clips in. This is definitely a little bit easier than the way I had been doing it, which was buying the hardware from Lowe's, the little 90-degree clamps. All you gotta do is put 1 screw in these instead of 2 screws like in those. So this is the shelf that is going to be the media shelf. Now the cabinet itself has supports in the back. If you don't remember those, you can rewind and check those out. But I have to cut out for those, so I used a pole saw. Once I got those cut out, I was able to put some spacers underneath the shelf and put some supports in with pocket holes. Because the top of this cabinet, my oak, was only 1 inch, I decided, just like the nightstand build, to put a 2-inch piece of cedar all the way around. Well, not all the way around. It turns out that I only had enough cedar to do 3 sides, both top and bottom. So that's what I did. And you can see me here running it through the planer, and you can see how pretty it's coming out, all nice and red and purple. Getting everything ran through the table saw was a breeze. Everything was 2 inches. We just cut it all up and it was all ready to go. We cut all the bad stuff out, and then it was on to the miter saw once again. So I cut the miters on both ends of the long board. That way I could clamp the board to the top and get all my measurements for the 2 sides. And this worked really well too. It made life a lot easier as far as gluing everything on. I didn't have to fumble and try to fight with the front piece and the side piece all at the same time. The front just stayed right in place. I tacked on the side piece, and then I was able to glue and tack on the front piece. Everything went nice and easy. And since the clamps were so handy in helping me get the sides all ready, I figured, you know what, let's use them to hold one side of this so I could get the left side lined up. And then I took it off and I finished up the right side of it. So I put a bottom on it, and I put some Harbor Freight wheels on it. Now it's time to do the trim on the bottom. The reason I waited to do the trim on the bottom after the wheels was so that I knew how far I wanted the trim to come down. I think it came out to right around 3/4 of an inch drop down off of the cabinet itself. And just to connect the top and the bottom cedar trim, I decided to stick a small 1-inch piece of trim in between them. Put a little bevel on them, a little glue on them, and then we just kind of hammer them home with some brad nails. And I think it's looking pretty good. Now we're going to cover it with some of that dark walnut stain, just like the nightstand and the bed. Now, doing this shelf kind of sucked. It might have been a good idea to pre-finish that before I put it in there. But, ergo, it's done. So, now we do the top and the sides. And that cedar trim, I'm thinking might have looked better in a natural color, but it looks pretty good with a dark walnut too. This next part is about the drawers. You can see there I marked them A and B. This is how I joint my boards when gluing them together. I put the A side against the fence, and I put the B side away from the fence, switching them back and forth. That way I get a nice clean glue up in my joint. I talked earlier about gluing up the boards for the drawers because you don't have many pallet boards that are 5.5 inches, and I've yet to see any that are 10 inches. So I have to glue up pallet boards so that I can make drawers deep enough to fit a big dresser like this. I ran all the boards about 5/8 of an inch earlier on in the project. That way every night toward the end of my day I would put them in clamps with glue to let them sit overnight. Then I would stack them off to the side, and then the next day, again at the end of the day, I'd put them all in clamps and glue them up. That way every day when I come back into the shop I had a nice stack of boards ready to go through my planer. Since it only takes 5 or 10 minutes to glue them up and throw them in, that leaves my bench open all day with nothing on it instead of waiting for the glue to dry so I can take them off my bench. After that I can go ahead and put the dado in there and get the bottom in, and then secure it all together with some pocket holes. Pocket holes may not be the prettiest joinery method, but it is effective, it does have strength, and it is fairly easy for a beginner. If you're going to do a false front on your drawers, then you can put the pocket holes in the front and the back. And then that false front will cover up the pocket holes on the front, and you'll never see any of your pocket holes at all. I usually just put them on the sides as to where it's not going to bother anything. Nobody in my house cares. They don't look at the sides of their drawers. I'm putting roundovers on 3 of the sides. The 3 of the sides that are not the front, that is. See, I'm not going to be putting a false front on any of these drawers. I will be putting trim on later on. You'll see that in a little bit. Right now, I'm doing the dado for my dovetail rails. This worked out pretty well. I'm very happy that I did not try to do the dovetail in the drawer itself. I have made a mistake many times of putting my trim on before trying to apply my hardware. So this time I was actually halfway bright and drilled the holes for my hardware before putting the trim on. It is much easier this way. Here you can see that trim I was talking about. It's cut to 1 inch and it's got mitered edges, and it looks like it's a false front on the front of this drawer, which it is not. It is just the trim, and it creates a door stop when it's all the way closed. The last thing we got to do to this project is add a little class with a little brass. These are some brass drawer pulls, and I've used these on the bed and the nightstand, and they look really good. I think between the 3 of them, there are like 60 or 70 of these brass drawer pulls. The pillar on these drawer pulls have a slight taper to them. So what I did is I picked a drill bit that was kind of midway between the very bottom and the very top. That way I could hammer them in and they would be really snug. I added a little bit of CA glue and just to hold them in there. And now we're going to put in the wire looms, I think they are. I don't even know what they're called. They're usually used on the tops of desks for the wires to go through. They open and close and they make everything look real nice. Just kind of cleans it up a little bit. And that way your wires don't catch on the bare wood. So this is my big dresser for my daughter. And this is going to conclude this video for today. If you guys like this dresser and you want to build one, but you don't know if your wife or husband will like it, share this video with them and let them decide on their own. This is done. I'm out of here. I'm going to go put this in my daughter's room. So like, subscribe, see what's next. All right, I'll see y'all later.